being here tonight. Thank you, Leonidas. Thanks, Marcel. Huge thanks as well for Stefan Klambaneva, who will be our moderator tonight. He has been helping us a lot into putting this together tonight. So massive thanks to you, and thanks as well to our partners, so the IDSA, NYCxDesign, Super Ventures, and Hardware Massive. Enjoy the food, enjoy the drink, enjoy the discussion. If you want to have an AR demo as well, we have Noah, Liwei, and Edward who can do that for you. We'll be very pleased to demo the app to you. And with that,
great.
It's all yours.
Well, first of all, again, thank you. When I first approached the Augmented Review team and Charles with this idea, I was like, we have to do something really to help establish the value of augmented reality for designers. And so it made a lot of sense. And when we, when we kick this off, it's great to have the support. So thank you very much. And we'll kick this off officially. And for those of you, hopefully also that are joining us online, we're live on Facebook. For those that want to tweet about it, you can find them on Augmented Review's Facebook page. So there's a lot of social media. Use the hashtag Augmented Designer for any things you might want to post. And just as a reminder, there's also an option for us to ask questions through the app online, neti.com, and we'll be able to, there's a special code that we'll be sharing through that. So I got it. There we go. Yep, there you go. It's all good. So yeah, for those that want to download the app and then use that special code, you'll be able to log in and we'll be able to capture those questions and seamlessly to my phone. So with that, let's kick it off. So some introductions. I'm going to pass it along to our fine panelists, but again, what we wanted to bring together is folks that could really give you the latest and greatest of a snapshot of the industry, as well as some real hard use cases for industry-specific examples, given that we are during NYCxDesign, so New York Design Week, and we have some great designers here. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Ori to introduce himself. Ori.
Thank you, Stefan. Hi, everybody. My name is Ori Invar. I've been helping build the AR ecosystem for over 12 years now as an entrepreneur, event organizer, and recently as an investor. Started a company back in 2009 that developed AR games, not so different than Pokemon Go. It was kind of early, as you can imagine, but actually we also developed some hardcore tech that eventually was acquired by Apple and became the foundation for ARKit. So it was nice to see kind of the whole loop closing with that acquisition. But at the same time, back then we felt so lonely developing in AR that we felt like we need to get together. And there was no event for AR at the time. So we started something that is now called AWE as a small event, quirky event with just a couple hundred people with some great vision and ideas and concepts. And over the years, it became one of the most influential events in this space. Actually, the next event is happening next week in Santa Clara. So if you can still book some flights, I'll be happy to kind of have you use this discount code, which will give you the best discount we have today. But it really became this way for everyone in the AR ecosystem to get together, to partner, to develop ideas, to educate, and give energy to everybody that goes there. So that's why we did it for ourselves, and now it's kind of serving the whole industry. So let's move to the next slide. Just a few words about Super Ventures, the fund that we put together a couple of years ago with the focus of investing in early AR startups. So if you want to talk about that, happy to talk about it now or today or anytime. And I'm really kind of excited about this evening because ever since I started my journey in AR, it was all about how do you find the most relevant experiences to develop in AR. And design is still something that I think we all in the industry need to figure out what it really means, because it's a whole new type of experience, a whole new language that we all need to create. So I'm really excited to have you guys here with us today.
Excellent, thank you. So, Marcel, take it away. Why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Okay, hi, Marcel Buerta. I run 10xBeta, a product development firm in the Navy Yard inside New Lab, for those of you who have been there. 10xBeta started, on this premise that, most of my work was always in beta. It felt like it was never being finished, and it was like 10 projects at a time. So it was kind of like just poking fun at myself. But right now, today, we have two venture funds made typically about 6 product investments a year. We developed about 20 products a year for the last 5-6 years. We do robotics, medtech, consumer tech, connected devices, vertical takeoff aircraft, mobility, you name it. So we're industry agnostic. We use our expertise in digital manufacturing, additive, subtractive, sort of global collaboration, and sort of all our past experience of pain of how to collaborate remotely to do some great work across 5 offices. Right now we have our epicenter for work is out of the New Lab here in New York, but we have teams in San Francisco, Amsterdam, maybe coalescing around Berlin, Cape Town, and Johannesburg. Next week we'll be in the South African office sharing some of our work around manufactured stories for the ad industry with the South African groups, and the following week we're back in New York doing robotics and first responder tech.
Great, thank you very much. Next we're going to go to Leonidas. Leonidas, please introduce yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Leonidas Trampoukis. I'm a Greek architect living in Europe for the past 13 years. So together with my partner Lenny, we are founders of LOT. It's an architecture office based here in New York and in Athens in Greece. And Object of Common Interest, our design studio. We are not in the industrial design background. We are focused more in more sculptural design. We work with galleries, institutions, museums. We present installations that have to do with space and objects at the same time, merging our 2 backgrounds as architects and designers. What you see is a temporary theater we designed for Design Miami 2 years ago, down in Miami. We work a lot with temporary projects because they give us opportunity to play, and as temporary then they are dissolved in many different pieces that are actually collaborations with galleries, or they just disappear. And so this sense of temporariness is something that we always like to work with. We recently started experimenting and playing around with AR in our work. Not just in the design part, but also for presentation, and something I would like to speak later in this panel about our experience with that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And last but not least, I'm going to introduce Charles, who already kind of kicked things off already, but tell a little bit about yourself, Charles.
Yeah, sure. So Charles Monroe, co-founder at Augmented Review. Again, we're using augmented reality to streamline the product design process. I've been in the virtual prototyping industry for the last 8 years. I've been working with automotive manufacturers, aircraft manufacturers. We were installing huge virtual reality systems, the size of this room maybe. Minimum investment, 6 digits minimum. And then 2 years ago came to market ARKit and AR Core, those 2 frameworks introduced by Apple and Google that basically make any smartphone AR compatible. And this was a kind of trigger event for me. I suddenly understood that we could bring those virtual prototypes to anyone, any designer, any design team. So what you see here is Augmented Review, the applications that we created 1 year ago. This is pretty much what you can see in the experience today. We like to say that we are at the crossroads of 3D, augmented reality, and instant messaging. So if you're a designer, you're working with 3D model, you take your 3D model, you just drag and drop them into the platform, you can view them in AR, and then you can collaborate around. So those little dots that you see are collaboration items that triggers a conversation. It's precisely located, and you can say, change the shape, make this texture evolve, and so on and so forth. So that's for me.
Okay, excellent. So with sort of introductions, I left myself last. So I've been sort of in the space of what we call digital twin since the sort of the mid to late 90s. And as we saw the evolution of this space, we really came to me, it was obvious that we really needed to show the importance of how designers can really take advantage of this new medium. So that's the whole purpose of getting this panel discussion together today. So I come from a background of sort of a hybrid world where engineering and design and business, again, working for powerhouses such as IBM and the PLM provider called Dassault Systems, who's the developer of CAD tools such as SolidWorks and CATIA. And I've been working in these projects for clients at least the last 5 years with a lot of AR, and realizing what the process that we will need to have to be able to support the sort of this new medium, what we call augmented reality. So with that in mind, we're going to kick things off with a little bit of a kind of where we are, sort of a snapshot of kick things off in terms of setting the scene with a couple of themes that I wanted to cover for our discussion as we kick things off. So in setting the scene, I wanted to sort of show this sort of this eye chart of the current industry landscape, so you can sort of see where things are going. It's been obvious the last couple of years, and Ari, I'm going to ask you to kind of give us your perspective of this as well. But you see this extreme, huge evolution of players in almost every possible place, whether it's hardware developers, software, mobile apps, and the sort of the baseline technology to support all those. As it's evolving extremely quickly, it's changing drastically every quarter. If we look at another example here, and I had a couple more, but I'm not going to bore you to death. But the point I wanted to make with this is that the numbers are staggering. The amount of users per are estimated to go over. If you put them all together, it's over billions. It's billions of users, and you have probably the latest numbers as we move forward. But the reality here is we wanted to sort of see that the space as a whole here. And that's just AR. I can put up the VR developer side as well. But the other thing that I wanted to highlight is that we are going through this transformation. It is a point, there's an inflection point where you have the maturity of the technology going to a point where we can evolve. And we were just talking about this earlier, where you see this happened in the 60s, where you went from doing things at Hawk into rooms in GM, for example, which is that picture on the far left, which you have a bunch of draftsmen working on stuff on paper. Then you went into the 80s and 90s, where you had the personal computer evolving, where you start to see the evolution of a collaborative product development start to mature a little bit. And now you're going into this new phase where everybody can work remotely, either in VR or AR collaboratively. And what is that going to mean for us? So in order to kind of put that together, I wanted to highlight a couple of interesting things that I thought. The way I look at it here is I break it down into three. Sort of the thing that we see in the mass media, or the apps that are mainly made for consumers, is sort of living your life in this augmented reality space, right? And the other one that we're seeing a lot more of the last 5-6 years is taking this technology that exists, adding a little design, mixing it up, and letting it bake and see what comes out the other side, right? And then finally, the thing that's really interesting for me is this new medium, is once we have the technology ripe enough to be able to support the use cases, being able to design directly in augmented reality. And that's where I'm really interested to hear your perspectives on today. So these are some examples. I'm going to go through them very quickly, just so to get your thinking. I want you in the audience to start thinking about the kinds of things that we could be doing. So the traditional made-for-consumer kind of use cases, you have information on the go, you have actionable insights, hopefully taking, like I said here, giving the power back to the consumer or the shopper, going back and shopping in a store, traditional store. And other examples such as mixed reality for enjoyment, where we can talk about some of the new games that might be coming out your way. The second example that I wanted to share with you is this idea of where we have creative folks like the guys here on my right, who are sort of taking this medium and mixing in some creativity and some design, and what comes out on the other side. Well, you have some really powerful use cases that you can start to leverage. augmented communication of business plans. So how can you make better decisions faster? How can you conceptually support those case studies with powerful visuals? And then, at the end of the day, how do you create that visceral response to an experience, right? And that can be very powerful and help people along the way. I used the Game of Thrones for those that are Game of Thrones fans in the audience. No spoiler alerts in case you want to catch up, but just highlighting the examples of some of those visceral experiences that were created for some of those other experiential marketing events. And last but not least, something to think about as we move forward in this medium is sort of how can we move and how can we make somebody an augmented designer? And that's the examples here where you have sort of what I think about as an industrial designer or designers in general is they're very powerful, they have a very strong empathy, and they have the very strong ability of being able to design in context. And for non-designers, I think this is a tremendous opportunity to use these kinds of tools to help enable that kind of capability that these other non-designers may not have. And then finally, last but not least, for those that have been playing in these sort of in this area and in the tools, being able to directly design in 3D, like Gravity Sketch and some of the other tools that we're seeing, not only design reviews, but actually creating directly in that medium. So I'm really excited. A couple other things to think about here for the introduction is balance, and I'll point directly to this, is it's not only about the technology, but we need to make sure that it's just like spinning a plate. You can't have it all going one way, otherwise it's going to fall down. So you have to be able to mix this, have this right mix of technology, usage, business case, and the brand identity and staying true to your brand. And last, again, it's technology maturity, which we're going to get to in some of these questions. While it's not about the tech has to work. So that's why we have some startup companies here and some folks that are in the industry that can really help us, to give us some pointers along that way. So to kick things off with question number one. Question number one going to Ori. Ori, give us sort of a state of the industry today, please.
Sure. So, since I got into AR 12 years ago, we were trying to predict when is it going to really take off. And we always thought, it's like just a couple of years away because it's such an amazing technology. And, when the iPhone was introduced and then Android phones, all of a sudden you had this incredible device with all the ingredients you need for AR. But it took much longer than we all thought. But I think today, in 2019, it really feels like we're heading for exponential growth. And there are some really key market indicators that point to that. One is the tech giants are investing billions of dollars in these technologies. We're talking about Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Lenovo, many other Chinese companies as well. And that's producing not just more, technology and content, but also tools that are enabling people out there, like you said before, that can actually develop AR and VR applications in a much simpler way than when we started. The second point is that enterprises are now completely into it. Some of the surveys that we've seen recently point to over 70% of enterprises that have either started implementing AR and VR or plan to implement it by next year. And there's a lot of FOMO going on here because they see some of their competitors using it. They know that they have to use it, whether they understand how or why or not. The third part is the install base, especially when it comes to AR. With mobile AR, like you said, there's now over 1 billion mobile devices that are AR enabled. And that's an amazing install base.
Is it true that they're going to say, DigiCapital saying 2.5 billion by 2023? Does that seem reasonable? Is that the growth curve that you're seeing? So
today, there's 1 billion devices, and according to Facebook and some other metrics, there have been about 1 billion people that have experienced AR. So it's true that in most cases, maybe it's Pokemon Go and Snap lenses and so on, so not the high-end type of AR, but it's still AR, and it's educating people about this. And the report that we're seeing from these people is that those who tried it really liked it. whether it's for, try before you buy or for other kind of things. And that points to the fact that now that the trick is to create experiences for the rest of us, right, for everybody else, so that when you get in, you have something that can really be valuable for your life or your business. The fourth indicator is that investors have poured a record number of dollars into AR and VR startups, nearly $7 billion last year. And that's, again, that's a huge indicator that there's interest from investors, and there's plenty of startups out there that are developing interesting things that could really take this industry forward. So that's kind of not a surprise for me that most analysts predict that this could become a $200 billion industry sometime in the next decade. And that's, it's not where we were 10 years ago, where there were just some really cool ideas and concepts. Now it's real products, real people using it, and all the big companies are behind it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. That's very interesting. I'm going to go on to Marcel for question number 2 here. And this is it's a kind of general design, but I'm going to say, what is your design process? What is your holistic design process? And we're all in the age of the experience, if you use Joe Pine's quote, or the age of IoT. So how does that impact potentially your design process, Marcel?
For me, my design process has evolved over the last 20 years from, being at the forefront of the design challenge, being that person that generates the designs daily, to being the person today that has to facilitate the design experience and design tools for 20 other people, which is a very different role than, I have strong design desires and expressions and opinions, and it's very hard to impose these on my team, because we have an extremely talented group of people that I work with, and my sole goal today is to build a design business that's interesting at all levels, from venture to philanthropy. And how do we participate in our local and global ecosystem? How do we collaborate across offices? How do we optimize workflow? All the boring stuff that you don't think of when you're 20. But the stuff that really, when I started visualization, 2D visualization and animation was all the rage in the 90s. Then 3D printing in the early 2000s. And now it's like, you don't have to 3D print every model, and really you should get over 3D printing. It's awesome, and we use it every day, but it's not the right tool for rapid exploration across boundaries. So we are super interested in how VR and AR workflow will change our design practice over the next 10 years. Gravity Sketch and the ideas and the tools want to be better all the time, and all the money that's being poured in right now, you can see the rapid effect it's having on the way the way that we can, as a design office, use them without investing $1 billion ourselves. There's also, if anybody went to CES, we're seeing all this investment in television and lens technologies for the VR and AR headsets trickle its way into high-resolution headsets that the military and the design office alike can use. So we're super excited about resolution, miniaturization, lightweighting, things that will allow me to use this so that it feels like an extension of myself, so that it replaces, or not replaces, but becomes an alternative to the pencil and paper.
Awesome. Leonid, I'd like you to weigh in on this as well, from an architectural perspective, I think, as well.
Yeah, I think I would totally agree that we are a completely different type of studio, like smaller scale, more. We try to be more involved in boutique projects, and efficiency is even more important for us, that we don't have usually the capacity that you have or the capacity that larger firms have. So also, I think the current state in design is that also remote work and cross-disciplinary and cross-boundaries work is even more evident. So for such young firms to be able to be, they don't have the resources to be able to be efficient, as you said, traditional ways of working that with 3D models or with 2D, even 3D printing, that is super great, but I think more and more I see trying to explore AR and VR because of that necessity, and nowadays is more accessible. We used to hear it, we used to listen about, but it's now, even if I listened to it for the past many years, it's now that we have the capacity, young films like ours, to have the capacity to start exploring it. and we're trying to evolve through it and see what it can do for us.
So the lower barriers of entry has allowed you to sort of adopt these use
Exactly,
cases that would be prohibitive in the past.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Okay.
And also it's motivating because you say, okay, it's accessible. It's not only the large and the firms that have the resources can do it. Let's try it and see where it can take us and how we can make things work for us.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. So let's go on to question number 3. So this question is for my friend here, Charles. So take it away. What do you think?
So how ready is the technology? I guess we are there. If you look at the design process today, each stage is basically you have applications which are ready to help the designer today. So for instance, at sketching phase, when you start to think about an idea and designing it, I mean, Gravity Sketch, as an example, is a very good, very powerful tool. Then you want to go, I don't know, for design reviews. You work with Rhino 3D, for instance. You can use design reviews tools such as Mindesk VR. You can do in-depth review, provided you have the hardware, the setup, someone to do it. You want to do something instantly, really collaborate, streamline, share the design intent, as Leonidas mentioned, with basically everyone, even people who are not AR and VR ready. This is our sweet spot for augmented review. Further down the road in the product design process, you can think about feasibility and assembly studies, checking whether this part fits together with this other part. You have a great tool named Verify, V-R-I-F-Y, which enables you to do it in VR. It even enables you to record it and to send it to your manufacturer so that you don't have to share hundreds of slides with them, and so on and so forth. So I guess the real question is rather for the designer and the engineers to ask themselves, okay, which tool do I need for each step? Because we often hear at Augmented Review, okay, can you do renderings as well? Can you do assembly feasibility as well? No, we can do something very specific, very job to be done, very vertical. We do it well, and this is the same for the other apps. So the main questions that you have to ask yourself is, okay, which pain am I trying to solve with this AR or VR tool?
Excellent. All right, I'd like you to put your AWE hat on for a second here and give us some insights that you've gleaned from your many years at bringing all the best that there is for AR, VR, XR in one place in Santa Clara.
In terms of design?
Well, in terms of these use cases that I think Charles started off with a little bit. So some of the examples that you might be able to also share.
I mean, when it comes to use cases, we've seen a tremendous growth in the enterprise. First, starting in 2012, 2013, 2014. And there it was mostly around improving logistics processes, about remote expert assistance, about improving safety and security and things like that. But when you think more about kind of in terms of the design context and consumers, the mainstream, I think beyond entertainment, which I think most of us have tried, the face filters and so on. There's the biggest use case right now is probably in e-commerce. Try before you buy. So you want to buy a sofa, you can see how it looks in your living room. Or you want to buy glasses, you can see how it looks on your face. Or even earrings. And now, just this year, some amazing applications came out that allows you to see how a new color will look on your head before you actually put it on. And that's super valuable for users. I tried it myself, and I have to say, even without any hair, it works great. So these things are really have improved from a technology perspective and are becoming very useful. Another thing is what I like to call, will it fit? So you have something and you want to kind of measure it, you don't have a measuring tape, or you're not sure about the measurements. You can use AR to see how it will work. So for example, you want to make sure that your suitcase can be acceptable as a carry-on. Just point a kayak app or a Lufthansa app to it, and it immediately tells you if it kind of fits in that size. And then you can imagine how you can start measuring things in your life in a very quick way. You just point your smartphone to it and it gives you the answer immediately. And finally, I think maybe the number one use case that soon we're all going to use is navigation. Google Maps has already introduced AR-based navigation to on their Pixel phone, which some people are using, I guess. And soon it's going to be available to everyone on smartphones. And I think that will be a game changer, because then everyone will use augmented reality on a daily basis, and it will probably become the #1 use case.
Great. You want to add something?
May I add a question maybe for Marcel and Leonidas? I mean, have you already brought your design to customers with VR and AR? I know you did, but maybe can you tell us a bit about this experience?
Yes, we have in a couple of cases already, and in terms of like in a context of a review or of a very preliminary design, not as a final presentation, which I really, this is what we're looking for, because I think it's really good tool to convince. The way we used to convince many years ago with like this super high resolution and like realistic renderings. But this time it is something that you don't fool the other party, because it's there, it's real, and you can see it and almost touch it. And I think that has been appreciated from the other side. And then things don't need to be perfectly refined, like flashy renderings and lighting and like amazing details, because everything's acceptable when you see a physical thing. And that helped us a lot to like communicate our design without doing that much work, because we used to have put so much effort to do a presentation, but now we don't need it.
Yes, in the early 2000s, I used to pay rent from photoshopping 3D renderings. And that level of perfection that we were striving for then is not something that we're looking for now. Of course, Keyshot and other outputs are giving you real-time, high-resolution VR environment renderings if you want it. But our clients are in awe if they just see a working concept model that they can touch. There's this sense of ownership. I can touch it. It doesn't need to be a 3D print. It doesn't need to be a final object. That in-process flow and the ability now to start looking at portable VR systems and eventually for portable AR systems that they can play with, and then as simple as on your phone. We have, when I first reviewed Augmented review, it was basically, I was like, this is great because I can send a file. I was most interested about workflow and markup, but also the client interactions. Like they are excited about trying the new tool because to them, it's the first time they engage with this hardware. Very few of them are on top of that level of technology integration when it comes to the design process. It's their first time. They're super inspired, and no matter how simple it is. That will change when it becomes the norm, just like 3D printing became the norm. But right now what we're doing is we're changing our entire office infrastructure to allow us to experiment with different technologies, different design review technologies and design workflow technologies for the next 5 years, because we don't know what is going to be needed to drive these systems. So everything from the portable handset to the full server rack, we have accommodated for the entire array of hardware investment. So by effectively turning the office into this hard swappable server rack.
Great. So that's actually a perfect lead into the next question. I'm going to sort of set this up by saying, having the opportunity to see a lot of design houses, both architectural and industrial design, product development, and their AR sort of workshops, let's say, I've seen a lot of that technology that's everybody uses a little bit differently, have their own use cases. But for those that are wanting to jump into things, what are some of the key takeaways for companies that that designers wanting to dive into this? How can they get involved in it?
For us, it's very much still in the early stage of experimentation. I feel this with technologies changing so quickly, you're always going to be in the early stage of whatever the next version is. So for us, I don't want to get to too far ahead where you buy all the latest tech and then you're stuck with this old technology within 18 months. But we reinvest a certain amount of budget every month or every quarter in exploring these new technologies, whether they're 3D printing or robotics or sensing or AR, VR equipment. So I think committing to reinvesting in your education and experimentation in this space is what's going to drive success in this space. and figuring out what tech fits with your workflow, because it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. There are too many players and too many interesting things happening simultaneously.
Sure. So Leonida, I kind of want to jump on what Marcel said a little bit earlier about there used to be a time when we did a lot of that high-end renderings, and now we have this opportunity in this new medium. It's almost like less is more. Do you find that in the architectural clients sometimes?
I think it's really important. Architectural clients are a bit harder to work with because they tend to be a bit towards a more conservative mentality. I think the design world is moving faster, and the clients that have to do with design are easily trained or having more exposed to this kind of new technologies. So I think in terms of architecture, it happens in the very high end of the projects, and we're still a small firm, so I think there are much bigger players that can reapply. I was telling these guys earlier that 10 years ago, I was very impressed. I heard a lecture from Ben van Berkel from UN Studio, a studio from the Netherlands. They were doing a project in Stuttgart, and maybe 15 years ago they were using these kind of technologies that to me they were unheard, experimenting still. But the lecture was all not about the architecture, it was about training the owner, the client, to believe them. So that's the hardest thing. No matter, even with for user technologies or for conventional design in architecture, the most hard thing is to train somebody else to be a bit more forward thinking.
Yeah, I have an interesting anecdote from 2003. I was designing a church, a Catholic church, and I was supposed to show a sun path animation so that at a certain date the sun hit the baptismal font in this church. It was my last church. But I showed this successfully after about a morning's work, and then they made me, I was very young at this stage, they made me spend more than a week to build a physical paper model to verify that I wasn't lying about the coordinates of the sun. This was like basic 3D Studio Max stuff in 2003. But it was just, I couldn't even train my own boss to believe me or to use the tool properly. So it's hard.
Wow. Yeah. Great. Thanks, guys. Unless anybody on this side wants to chime in, I have a question for you already, number 5. So kind of putting now your wizard hat for what's coming next. What do you think is kind of just over the horizon when it comes to AR?
So, there's a lot that we can still do and improve on the technology side, but I would actually argue that this is the time for creators, for designers, for people that build content to shine. The tech is good enough. We have the tools. We have devices out there. Now let's create experiences that will delight users and will be essential for their lives. So for me, that's kind of the big focus. But the question is, what is good design? How do you design? What's the new language of interaction in a world where there's no keyboard and mouse? And these questions are only partially answered at this point. So I think the big things that we'll see in the next couple of years is kind of this language evolving, new techniques, new methods, not technology, but new methods of how to design and how to create interactions that really take advantage of this new medium.
Okay, Charles, would you care to weigh in a little?
Fully agree on that. Definitely, we some kind of to invent a new keyboard to help people basically design in AR or VR and grab this shape, make it bigger, make it evolve. So this is still in the way, I would say.
So it's a whole new language.
So we should develop it.
Yes, it's up to us. That's really, and just as a just as a sidebar, one of the conversations that I can share with from my discussions and projects with hardware developers like MetaVision is there is a need for a whole new user experience. We can't go back to, as I said in my early kickoff, it's not about it's about getting rid of the metaphor. We can't use another keyboard or a mouse to interpret things on X, Y, Z in something that's directly 3D in your mind. You should be able to go and use your hands naturally to develop the design directly in 3D. as it should be, without eliminating all those interpretations and interpolations that take place today.
Because we're still doing it. Once when we're reviewing, I'm sure you're doing it, when we're reviewing things with our colleagues or with anyone, you still do the gestures. The gestures are there, it's just that they don't do anything.
Well, you're Greek, so it's already there. So, guys, as a sort of the question 5 to you as well, but a little bit of a twist. So, keeping that in mind, I have because you're more on the creative side, I would say, architecture, design. I was presenting with one of the designers, senior designers from Unity, speaking before me, where he kind of stood up and he said, with AR, I think there won't be a need for designers in the future because it's going to be designed automatically. So for the creatives, which I'm part of that as well, I want your input on this particular spot. So Marcel,
I think with every wave of new technology from the first Ford motor car, that statement has been made. There's no need for designers because we've optimized this part of industry so much that no one has to rethink it. Ford obviously was the precursor to a massive car industry today, and it's being disrupted again by newcomers. I think that it's kind of a naive statement, but it's the perfect statement to make to aggravate designers, because sometimes they need to be aggravated to really step up to the plate and design new interfaces. Designers are very easy to say this is too hard, I don't want to understand all the technology and all the sort of context or contextualization of what makes this design tool work. I think once you get out of that comfort zone of using the tool effectively and you start looking at the software, the hardware, the sensing, then you can start looking at what kind of interface is going to drive the future of interaction for VR, AR, and future tools. And I'm sitting here, there's some great things that we can talk about, or maybe build prototypes around, just to make AR experiences better. And that's what I hope to do for the next 5 years, is create that platform for experimentation where we can just make this part of our normal output and just sort of get under the hood of what makes it tick.
Leonida?
I think that designers are among the easiest people to adapt to new circumstances and new areas of play. And I think that has been there historically. We have this expression in Greek: whatever your rock you'll lift, you'll find a designer out. So I really think that's behind every great project there is a great designer. And so designers evolve, and the way technology evolves, designers will find a way to use that technology to do something new. And I think they're open-minded enough to maybe somebody studies interior design or architecture, but ends up doing a startup or doing whatever else. And that's, I think design thinking doesn't go away. And I think that's why they're useful in all these explorations of new applications and companies that acquire companies. And as you said, it's the time of designers to try to play around and see what they can come up with. Many times they don't get all the credit, many times they get all the credit, but they keep doing it.
Great. Well, thank you for that. We're going to kind of open it up to the audience over the next couple of minutes. So one of the things that I have to do as you get started, if you have any questions, you can use the website, like I mentioned, and I'll get them directly to my phone. In addition, I want to ask you guys a couple of questions. How many people in the audience feel like they have a pretty good grasp on augmented reality? Show of hands. Just a couple. Okay. Sort of. Okay. So about half the audience. And let me ask you this: have you ever played Pokemon Go? Show of hands. So the rest of the folks that didn't put their hands up, you did now. So it looks like actually you're better, or you're more familiar than you actually knew about it. So I wanted to sort of get that started, underway. There is some news that the new Harry Potter augmented reality app is just about to be released, I heard. I don't know, maybe you can confirm that or deny it. So any questions from the audience? I wanted to sort of ask if we have any. You want to use the app or not? We could just go directly to the old-fashioned one in the back there, sir.
I'm just curious to know, in what ways do you think the smartphone is an ideal platform, but also not an ideal platform for AR experiences or interactions?
I'm I'm happy to take that. I think it's a stepping stone really towards where we all want to go. I think it's pretty clear that we want to, when AR becomes really powerful when it's hands-free, when you can just see the information overlaid on the world somehow, whether it's using glasses, projection mapping, magical mirror, whatever it is. But we don't have that technology perfected yet in a way that can, reach the mainstream. And that's why we need this smartphone as sort of a window into that world. And it's good enough. Again, I think based on the technology that is out there, based on the experiences that we've already seen, it's delivering quite a bit on the promise of where AR could go. So you still look into the world through a screen, so it's not exactly interacting directly with the world, but it's pretty close to that. So I think for now, or for next probably couple of years, it's the ideal platform that we have on hand that is available to 1 billion people out, or 2.5 billion people out there. But where we all really want to go is into some form of smart glasses where AR is everywhere you look without the need to hold anything in your hand.
Yeah, anybody else want to weigh in on that? Or
yeah, I was at South by Southwest. I came across the Bose AR headphones, so with the sunglasses with the speakers, surround sound in, and I was kind of disappointed at first. They're like, oh, the software is not ready yet, but here's the hardware. You can, have it's a cool mic, earphone headset. But the quality was so good to just start imagining what it could be if there was sort of like a visual interaction with the sound interaction for this immersive hands-free experience on top of your layered world, because there's nothing that annoys me more than having a phone stuck in front of your face, right? But it is the right first step. And I think, Google Glass went far to that they did a lot of things right to show us what the future could be. They may have just been 10, 20 years too early.
yeah, I think that's a good point to add to that. I think you hit it right on the head. There's a new study that just came out that said they're about 50% more time. They'll spend more time on an app, on an AR, VR app, if there is sound involved in the experience. So the engagement is so much more there if you have that additional level. And one other point of information and interest for those that want to, there's 2 pop-up stores that were in the city that are still down in Soho that you should check out. There's a Bose and there's, I think, Bang & Olufsen. So if you haven't been downtown to Soho, there's 2 augmented reality, but on the sound side, that you guys can explore. And we had a question in the front.
Yeah, so I kind of want to return to question 5, and this is a general question for the panel, but you mentioned, Stefan, if I can quote you, this eliminate the metaphor. But if we look at all the other kind of technology that's kind of advanced, since we talk about the keyboard and mouse, there's a reason that technology, there's hints of it in the smartphone, for example. You have a keyboard. Do you really feel that it'll be so simple to just kind of do away with all of these best practices of design and interaction that we've had for the past however many years and just shift to this 3D interface?
No, I think you're going to still use all the traditional tools. Most of us, it depends on your age, right? So I drew on a drawing board. It was like those transition moments. So 25 years ago, I drew on a drawing board, and before that on an easel, and after that in CAD and CAM and in 3D, and all the way to where we are today. And I would say that the interfaces and the experiences that we design will layer on top of what is existing and functional. It takes you up to 2 weeks to learn a new interface. You're not going to suddenly jump and forget everything that you were trained to do. My 4-year-old kid can navigate her mom's iPhone and remembers all the security keys for all the phones and devices. She's 4 years old. And I don't know if I was able to do that at 4 years, but that's her world. So she's, I think it depends where you come in, and it depends also what your history is. Maybe if you never learn how to type on a keyboard and everything's voice recognition and Alexa's your friend, then it's a different world.
I'd like to add to that. To answer your question, I don't think it's going to be easy, but it's going to be more natural. Because if you think about it, computing, as we know it, personal computing is only around for 40 years maybe. And before that, for 1 million years, humans interacted in a completely different way with the world, with each other, communicated in a more natural way, kind of like spatial computing is promising. So I think it's going to be, at some point in the future, we'll look back at those the last 40 years and we'll think it was really an awkward phase in humanity where we used those keyboards and two-dimensional screens, and we kind of interacted in a way that is not really the way our brains are wired, right? I mean, the way we interact is by moving in a space, and when you move your head, things move accordingly, and that's not happening on a 2D screen that we have experienced in the past 30 or 40 years. So the transition back to a more natural phase is going to be hard, but I think it's inevitable, and eventually it will be the most natural way that we interact with computing.
Guys, before I weigh in, did you guys have any comments?
No, I totally agree with that. I think it's actually easy to change because we've been having like a phone on our hands for the past 10 years maximum, and then what is 10 years? Nothing. Right?
Yeah. I'm going to use an example from one of my idols in this space is Don Norman. For those that design of everyday things or the invisible computer. So if you haven't read any of those books, I would suggest you look him up because he really has that ability to showcase the reason why what you're saying is so important. So in one of my talks about AR, I used the 500 years of Da Vinci, just celebrated about a month ago, to make this point. He's considered probably, I use him, I coin him as one of the first hybrid designers because he did everything, right? And he used left brain and right brain. He was a surgeon and did anatomy and also did beautiful art. So and sculpture and everything. So he used his hands. He didn't have these tools that we created the last 40, 50 years. So our brain, like you said, is hardwired to do this sort of thing, and it comes natural. How does our 7-month-old or a 1-year-old use a mobile phone like an Apple without having to learn anything? They can't read, right? It just comes naturally, and that is very difficult to be able to do properly. But if you can do it, I think that's where it's going to have tremendous payoffs, and it's going to be able to really become a ubiquitous new language and medium in which we can creatively make stuff in a much better way, in a much more natural way for a lot more people than just the experts that are in this field that spent 20 years mastering a particular tool or a device to input data. Any other questions? No.
I think going back to something that's more natural, I think that's super fundamental because what is life if you're holding something in your hand all the time, right? It was never meant to be like that. So I think going natural, it will be the hard thing to happen from this stage. It will be very hard, but I think it has to happen.
Great. Any other questions from the panel, from the audience? One more. Switch it back, and we'll come back to you last.
How do you see the role of the professional designer changing as tools such as this, especially in tandem with 3D printing, moves more into like the household?
I think it's the same as software. The question that you're asking points to the companies that launch software where you can design your own house in your own household, right? So from the design perspective and the complexity of creativity at scale, I've seen people sort of assume that they can just do it themselves because design is easy, architecture is easy, product design is easy, but it's not, because it takes a lifetime of training to just almost get it right. And I think these tools will make its way into the household, but they will be applied in different ways in the design office versus the household in terms of education, early access, training, and professional services. I think the same tools will be used in different ways. But I always cringe when I see like another company launching that's going to help you design your 2.5-bedroom house efficiently for the suburbs. I'm like, why?
For that, I think that AR and VR and this kind of more natural visual technology will be easier to get into the homes because it's not tangible and it's more accessible. As you said, it's already there. Nobody was really gonna 3D print things at home. I don't think it will ever happen because
It's a luxury.
we're still consumers and we're gonna get it from somewhere. And but I think it's the opposite thing will happen with AR.
Yeah, I mean, the promise that we had from Back to the Future was that you can, order a recipe for something offline and then it will just constitute itself in your household. But miniaturization, if we really look at the physics of making something out of nothing in a household with, core chemistry, that's, I want to say, hundreds of years out. It's like maybe it's not our near future. But so I agree with you. Yeah. We're not going to make everything at home.
I think what happened though was that everything became much more accessible. For example, you can go online on Amazon, you can order anything you like and arrive the same day, or you can 3D print whatever you like and have it in the same day. So all these application companies came up, and so you don't really need to have anything at home because you can have it super fast and super easy.
Yes, it's a business problem. It's a cost-benefit analysis for having it at home versus having it sort of near your home.
Yeah, and there are some, there are really powerful use cases. I don't know if you've had a chance to use that NBA VR, but you get to see courtside what the action is like. I mean, how many people can actually afford $5,500 tickets at Madison Square Gardens or down to watch, your favorite basketball team? Well, now thousands upon thousands of people can see that experience. It may not be the real thing, but for not being able to ever experience something like that ever, it is the next best thing.
The scary part is that maybe that will become better and easier so that it will replace the actual experience. And it has happened already. See people Instagramming, right? It has replaced actual experiences with different kind of experience. Everything happens for something else.
Yeah. The downside of potential unintended consequences of these technologies.
I mean, I think we're the human race and all the technologies that we sort of develop over our lifetimes are in constant tension with our social interactions with each other and with the world. So that tension is not going to go away.
Well, spoken like a true designer. I think we're going to wrap things up. I have one last question for Ori. Just putting your other hat on now. So Super Ventures, sort of think about that as an investment perspective for what are the lessons learned for those that are sort of scouting those new technologies that you might be looking for, in a company to invest in? Like we talked about, 3D printing is sort of, it's maybe past its heyday. Now we're looking at AR and VR is really taking off. What other, is it the hardware manufacturers? What should we, how would you respond as a sort of from an investment perspective?
You're asking this from an entrepreneur perspective, like what should you think about? So I think, for me, it's really important to understand that this technology was actually born 50 years ago. And if you want to build something for the next 5, 10, 20 years, I think it's important to understand this history, because people have made all the mistakes possible, whether it's on the tech, on the user experience, on the use cases, on the business models. So before you start something, of course, focus on something that you're passionate about, a problem that is really important to be solved using these technologies. But also look at what others have been doing in this space and make sure that you're really ready to kind of compare yourself to those and explain or show how you're different and better than any of these things. Because, especially when you meet someone like myself, people that have been in this space for a long time, we've seen everything. So we've seen, several thousand companies pitching in this space. And many haven't done this homework of really looking at what's happening in the competition. So it comes up very quickly in the discussion. So that's kind of my tip.
Great. Well, I'm going to ask the last question to the audience. What can you imagine as the new generation of augmented designers? We'll put the question back out to you. You've had a chance to sort of hear from some of the experts in the field. Where do you think augmented designers can actually go to? What could they be doing using this new medium? Thank you very much.